Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a stack of documents on the desk today that paints a picture of what I can only describe as a massive corporate paradox. We're looking at Novo Nordisk.
The undisputed heavy hitter of the weight loss world.
Usually, yes. But here's the setup that we need to unravel today because it honestly has me scratching my head. We have their Q4 2025 earnings report right here. On one hand, they have just launched what looks like the holy grail of obesity treatments, a pill that actually works, and it is breaking every record in the book.
The demand numbers are, they're genuinely unprecedented. It's a rocket ship.
But on the other hand, you look at the stock ticker in extended trading, and it's bleeding red, down over 6%. And even weirder, the company is explicitly telling us that next year, in 2026, their sales are going to shrink. They're forecasting a decline.
It creates a lot of cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
It does.
You see record-breaking launch and sales decline in the same headline.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out the math behind that contradiction. How can a company be dominating the hottest market on the planet, launch a blockbuster product, and yet tell investors, brace yourselves, we're going to make less money?
It is the question of the day. And if you read through the transcript of the earnings call with CEO Mike Dalstar, you realize we aren't just looking at a bad quarter. We're watching a fundamental regime change in the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh, wow.
We're moving from the luxury era of weight loss, drugs, high price, scarcity, exclusivity, to the mass market era.
Yeah.
And what the market is realizing today is that the transition between those two eras is incredibly expensive.
Expense is one thing, but a sales decline, that feels aggressive. They are guiding for -5% to -13% growth next year. That is a sharp U-turn from the double-digit growth we're, used to seeing from them.
It is a sharp U-turn. But to understand it, we have to look at the three distinct pieces of this puzzle separately before we put them together. We have the new pill, we have the pricing war, and we have the future pipeline.
Okay, let's start with the pill. Because for years, the narrative has been injections. Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, they're pens, you have to needle yourself. But now we have the Wegovy pill.
Oral semaglutide. The game changer.
Right. It got approved in December 2025, hit the shelves January 5th, 2026, just a few weeks ago. We have early data on how it's doing, and I want you to put this in context for me. Dave Moore, the head of U.S. operations, he threw out some numbers regarding uptake that seemed big, but I don't really have a baseline. Is it actually impressive?
The baseline is essentially zero, because we've never seen a launch like this.
Nothing to even compare it to.
Nothing. Moore shared that for the week ending January 23rd, total prescriptions for this new pill hit 50,000.
50,000 scripts in 1 week.
In a single week. And to give you that comparison you asked for, that is double the uptake velocity of any prior anti-obesity drug launch in U.S. history.
Wow.
It took the injectable versions months to hit the volume numbers the pill hit in days. By early February, they already had 170,000 people on the therapy.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why is the pill such a velocity driver? Is it just that people are squeamish about needles? Or is there something else driving that demand?
The needle phobia factor is real, certainly. It lowers the psychological barrier to entry. But from a scientific standpoint, this is a massive victory. We have to remember what semaglutide actually is. It's a peptide.
Let's pause on that. Define peptide for us in this context. Why does that matter for a pill versus an injection?
Think of a peptide as a small protein. Biologically, your stomach is designed to be a hostile environment for proteins. That's how digestion works.
Right.
If you eat a steak, your stomach acid breaks it down into amino acids so your body can use it. If you swallow a normal peptide drug, your stomach digests it before it can get into your bloodstream to do its job.
So making a pill out of this is basically like trying to mail a letter through a paper shredder?
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You are trying to get the message, the drug, through the shredder of the stomach intact. The engineering hurdle here was creating a formulation that shields the drug enough to survive that environment and still get absorbed. Novo Nordisk didn't just manage to do that. They produced a pill that, according to the data, works better than the competition.
They made a specific comparison in the earnings call against a competitor, right? A drug called orforglipron.
They did. Orforglipron is a competitor pill. Novo highlighted that their Wegovy pill showed about 16.6% weight loss. The competitor was sitting around 12.4%.
Now, playing devil's advocate here. To a layman, 4% doesn't sound like a massive gap. Does that 4% really drive consumer behavior?
In the obesity market, absolutely.
Yeah.
That 4% is the difference between my clothes fit a little better and I've changed my entire health profile.
Okay.
Mike Dalstar made this point during the Q&A. He basically said, If you give a patient a choice between 12% and nearly 17%, they aren't going to look at the minor details or the brand loyalty. They want the efficacy.
Speaking of consumer choices, there was one statistic in the launch data that I circled 3 times in red ink. It's about who is paying for this.
The self-pay numbers.
Exactly. Of those 50,000 weekly scripts, 45,000 of them were cash, self-pay. That means people aren't waiting for insurance approvals. They are just buying it.
It is the single most important data point in the entire report. It tells us about elasticity. In economics, if demand drops when prices go up, it's elastic. If people buy it no matter what, it's inelastic. This proves that weight loss is highly inelastic. People are walking into pharmacies and putting down credit cards for hundreds of dollars because they are desperate for the result.
So roughly 90% of the early volume is coming from people's own pockets.
Correct. And that actually bridges us to the paradox we started with.
Right, because here's where I get lost. If you have 170,000 people and growing paying cash and breaking records, the cash register should be ringing off the hook. Why is the CFO, Karsten Munk-Nielsen, telling us that sales and operating profit are going to drop in 2026? If everyone is buying it, where is the money going?
It comes down to a concept they call pricing headwinds. But that's corporate speak.
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
What it really means is that the price per pill is falling much faster than the number of pills sold is rising.
Break that down. What is dragging the price down?
There are 3 heavy anchors weighing on the price. The first is something called MFN clauses, most favored nation clauses.
I've heard of that in international trade deals, but how does it apply to a drug company?
In this context, it's about a deal Novo made with the U.S. administration regarding Medicare prices. Without getting bogged down in the dense legal text, the agreement essentially caps the maximum price they can charge based on the lowest prices negotiated elsewhere. It acts as a ceiling.
So a price ceiling.
As they sell more into government channels, that ceiling presses down on their average revenue per patient.
So the government has effectively negotiated a bulk discount that applies broadly.
In a sense, yes. Then you have the second anchor, Medicaid. The report explicitly noted that states like California are dropping Medicaid coverage for anti-obesity medicines entirely.
I missed that detail. California just stopped paying.
Yes. Budget concerns. California faces a deficit, and these drugs are expensive, so they cut coverage. So that wipes out a significant chunk of covered volume. But the third factor is the most fascinating because it is self-inflicted. Novo is voluntarily lowering what they call initiation prices.
Why would they lower their own price when demand is at record highs? That seems to violate supply and demand 101.
It does, unless you are playing a long-term game of land grab. Mike Dowstar explained that they are offering the drug for around $199 in some channels to get patients started.
$199, that's a fraction of the list price we used to see, which is over $1,000.
Exactly. They are betting on volume over margin. They know that once a patient starts on the pill and sees results, they are likely to stay on it for life. So Novo is saying, we will take a hit on the price in 2026. We will lose money on the front end to acquire the customer.
It's the subscription model, like a streaming service offering a free month, but for biology.
Ideally, yes. They are trying to build a massive patient base, millions of people, before the competition catches up. But the accounting reality is that in 2026, selling a drug for $199 instead of $1,000 hurts your bottom line, even if you sell 3 times as much of it.
And that explains the stock drop. Wall Street looks at the spreadsheet for 2026, sees a minus sign, and panics.
Investors hate transition years. They want growth now. Novo is saying, trust us, we're building a fortress for 2028, but the market is saying, show me the money today.
You mentioned they are trying to bypass insurance friction. Is that part of this $199 strategy?
It is. They've launched NovoCare Pharmacy and deepened ties with Amazon Pharmacy. They are building a direct-to-consumer pipeline.
Because dealing with insurance for these drugs is a nightmare for most people.
It's the biggest friction point. Prior authorizations, denials, appeals. By lowering the cash price and selling direct, Novo is essentially saying to the patient, skip the headache, just pay us directly and we'll ship it to your door.
That is a bold move. It cuts out the middlemen.
It does. And currently, about 30% of their total injectable Wegovy scripts are going through this cash commercial channel. They want to push that higher.
Okay, so we have the pill, huge success, and the price, huge drop. But the third piece you mentioned was the pipeline. If I'm an investor looking at this and I see the price dropping to $199, am I worried that this just becomes a commodity, like generic ibuprofen?
That is the risk, the commoditization of weight loss. But Novo's answer to that is, you haven't seen anything yet. If you look at the R&D section of this report, you realize that Wegovy, the drug that is currently famous, is basically just version 1.0, the iPhone 1.
And what is the iPhone 2?
It's called CagriSema.
CagriSema. It sounds like a sci-fi villain. What is it?
It's a combination therapy. It takes semaglutide, the
Yeah.
stuff in Wegovy, and combines it with a completely different molecule called cagrelintide.
Why combine them? Do they do different things?
They hit different pathways in the brain and body regarding hunger and fullness. It's a synergistic effect. It attacks the appetite from two directions at once. And the data from the Reimagine 2 trial they just discussed is startling.
Give me the numbers.
This specific trial was on people with type 2 diabetes. Now, you have to understand, it is notoriously harder for people with diabetes to lose weight than the general population. Their metabolism actively fights against weight loss.
So usually if a drug works for obesity, it works less well for diabetics?
Correct. Usually significantly less well. But in this trial, CagriSema showed superior weight loss of 14.2% in diabetics. But here is the wow stat that stood out to me. 1 in 4 patients on CagriSema lost over 20% of their body weight.
20% in a diabetic population.
That is approaching the efficacy of bariatric surgery, gastric bypass levels, but in an injection. And remember, that's for diabetes. The obesity-specific trials, which are called Redefine 1 and 11, are expected to show even higher numbers.
So if Wegovy is getting 15-17%, CagriSema could be hitting 25%.
Potentially. And they submitted this to the FDA in December 2025. We expect a decision late in 2026. So just as the market is worrying about the price of Wegovy dropping, Novo is preparing to launch a product that is significantly more powerful.
Isn't there a ceiling? I mean, at what point does more weight loss stop being a selling point? Do people want to lose 30% or 40%?
That's a valid question. But for the morbidly obese, or people with severe metabolic issues, getting back to a healthy BMI might require 30% loss. And to compete there, Novo isn't stopping at CagriSema. They also mentioned a high-dose semaglutide.
How high is high?
Currently, Wegovy maxes out at 2.4 milligrams. They are testing a 7.2 milligram dose.
That's a triple dose. Is that safe?
That's what the trials are for. But the strategic reason they're doing it is purely competitive. We have to talk about the competition here. Eli Lilly has a drug, tirzepatide, that has shown slightly better data than standard Wegovy. By tripling the dose, Novo is trying to brute force their efficacy numbers up to beat Lilly.
It really is an arms race.
It is. And if you look even further out into the blue sky research, there is a molecule called senigametide, formerly amycretin.
I remember reading about that one. Didn't it have some crazy early data?
It showed 22% weight loss in just 36 weeks in phase 1. They are moving that into phase 3 trials now, a program called Ambition. If CagriSema is the superdrug, senigametide is the hyperdrug.
Okay, so the science is clearly firing on all cylinders. But let's pivot back to the business side. Because you can have the best science in the world, but if the insurance companies, the payers, decide they aren't going to cover it, or if they grind your price down to zero, you don't have a business.
Precisely. And Novo Nordisk knows this. You can see it in the personnel announcements they tucked into this report.
The corporate shakeup. We saw 2 big names leaving. Dave Moore, the head of U.S. operations, and Ludovic Helfgott, head of product strategy.
Losing Dave Moore is significant. He's the guy who oversaw the massive rise of Ozempic. But look at who they hired to replace him, Jamie Miller.
And looking at his resume, he's not a traditional pharma sales guy.
No. He is the former CEO of Optum Specialty. He comes from United Health.
For the listener who doesn't track the U.S. healthcare bureaucracy, why does that matter?
United Health and Optum are the biggest payers in the United States. They are the gatekeepers. They're the ones who write the checks and decide which drugs get covered and which get denied.
So Novo hired a gatekeeper to run their sales.
Exactly. It is a very specific signal. It tells us that Novo realizes the battle in 2026 isn't about chemistry anymore. They have the chemistry. The battle is about navigating the labyrinth of U.S. insurance reimbursement. They hired Jamie Miller because he knows exactly how the insurance companies think, how they negotiate, and where their pressure points are.
That aligns perfectly with the pricing headwinds narrative. They need a negotiator who speaks insurance, not just a guy who can sell the medical benefits.
They are gearing up for a fight over access. We saw California drop coverage. We see Medicare capping prices. The insurers are pushing back hard, saying this costs too much. Jamie Miller's job is to unlock that door.
So let's zoom out and synthesize this for the listener. We have a company that has defined the last few years of pharmaceutical history. But the vibe has shifted.
It has. 2025 was the glory year. High prices, scarcity, everyone clamoring for the product. It was a luxury good.
And 2026.
2026 is the hangover, or more accurately, the growing pains. They are transitioning from a luxury model to a commodity model.
Commodity usually sounds like a bad word in business.
Not necessarily. Think of it like insulin or smartphones. When they become ubiquitous, the price drops, but the volume becomes immense. Novo's betting that if they lower the price to $199, they will get tens of millions of users instead of just millions. But crossing that valley, losing the high margins before you secure the mass volume, is painful.
And that valley is what the stock market is reacting to today.
Correct. The market sees the immediate pain of the price drop. Novo sees the future empire of the mass market.
But the takeaway for the listener beyond the stock price seems to be about the consumer. Despite the confusion, despite the insurance blocks, people are finding a way to get this pill.
The demand is undeniable. When 90% of your launch volume is cash pay, you know you have a product that people prioritize over almost anything else in their life. It changes the dynamic entirely.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave everyone with. We're sitting here analyzing quarterly sales figures and insurance contracts, but step back. We just confirmed that an oral pill, easy to take, easy to distribute, can cause 16% weight loss. And we know CagriSema is coming with potentially 25% or more.
The trajectory is incredibly steep.
If we are heading toward a world where significant weight loss is as easy and accessible as taking a daily vitamin, what happens to the rest of the economy? What happens to the food industry? What happens to a healthcare system that is largely built around treating the consequences of obesity, heart disease, knee replacement, sleep apnea?
It raises a profound question.
Are we looking at the end of obesity as a medical challenge? Or looking at the California decision, are we just seeing the beginning of a massive economic civil war over who has to pay for the cure? Because right now, it seems like nobody wants to pick up the check.
That is the trillion-dollar question.
Yeah.
And with Jamie Miller at the helm of U.S. Ops, Novo is betting they can force the system to pay up.
We will have to watch and see if they are right. That's it for this deep dive into Novo Nordisk's earnings. A pill, a price drop, and a paradox. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.